The Shaolin monks stood in a semicircle, their eyes sharp, their movements fluid, radiating centuries of discipline and power. They smirked as the young fighter approached, barely a shadow of the legends they had trained with. "You don't belong here, little dragon," the head monk said, his voice a mixture of amusement and challenge. The words echoed through the ancient courtyard, bouncing off the stone walls that had witnessed hundreds of battles before. Some of the monks chuckled quietly, convinced they were about to entertain themselves at the expense of an inexperienced challenger. But Bruce Lee didn't respond. No words, no hesitation, no sign of fear. He walked forward with calm precision, each step measured, deliberate, almost like he was moving in sync with a rhythm only he could hear. The ground beneath his feet seemed to hum with quiet tension, the air itself charged with anticipation. His eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the courtyard, taking in every monk, every stance, every breath. There was no arrogance, no need to prove himself with empty bravado. Yet the energy he carried told a different story, one of skill, confidence, and mastery far beyond his years. The monks shifted slightly, suddenly aware that this was not going to be a simple demonstration. Bruce reached the center of the courtyard, paused, and bowed ever so slightly, a gesture of respect, yet also a signal that he was ready. The silence grew thicker, heavy with curiosity and disbelief. And then it happened. The first move, subtle yet impossible to ignore, shattered the expectations of every observer. In seconds, the air was alive with motion, and the young fighter's control and precision left even the most seasoned Shaolin masters questioning everything they thought they knew. No one in that courtyard would ever forget what they saw that day. The little dragon had arrived, and with him, a lesson that true martial skill is not about noise or force, it is about calm, focus, and the power of action over words. It was a quiet morning in the Shaolin monastery. The sun had just begun to rise, casting golden light over the stone courtyard. Mist curled around the ancient pillars, giving the place an almost mystical aura. Monks moved in harmony, chanting softly, their bodies flowing through precise forms passed down for generations. Each movement was deliberate, disciplined, a testament to years of rigorous training and unwavering focus. The air was thick with concentration, yet calm, as if the very ground beneath them knew the value of this sacred practice. Then, without warning, the rhythm of the morning shifted. A figure appeared at the entrance of the courtyard, simple clothes, bare feet, and eyes sharp as blades. It was Bruce Lee. Every step he took was confident, measured, almost meditative. There was no hesitation, no need for theatrics, no entourage to announce his presence. Yet something about him made the monks pause mid-motion, their minds instinctively acknowledging that this was no ordinary visitor. The leader of the monks stepped forward, his expression a mixture of curiosity and challenge. "You think you can challenge us?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. There was a subtle edge to his tone, the kind that demanded respect and tested courage. Bruce Lee said nothing, not a word. He simply nodded, his eyes locked onto the leaders with unwavering focus. "Before the showdown could even begin, I want you to do something. Comment below where you're watching from, and if you respect the dedication and skill of martial artists everywhere, smash that like button and subscribe for more epic stories like this." Folded hands. Bruce bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, but every muscle in his body was alive, ready for action. He didn't rush, didn't show fear or arrogance. His calm presence filled the courtyard, drawing the attention of every monk and student present. They could feel it, a silent power, a mastery of mind and body that demanded acknowledgement without a single strike being thrown. In that moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. The monks, confident in their years of training, sensed that what was about to unfold would be unlike anything they had ever experienced. Bruce Lee wasn't there to boast or intimidate, he was there to demonstrate, to teach through action, and to remind everyone that true skill speaks for itself. The moment the first challenge was made, the courtyard seemed to shift. The monks, confident in their years of rigorous training, moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies striking the air like a single entity. High kicks arched through the morning sun, fast punches sliced past the space around them, spinning strikes cut invisible lines through the mist, and their chants, rhythmic and disciplined, created an almost hypnotic backdrop to the storm of motion. Bruce Lee stood in the center, calm, rooted like a tree yet fluid as water. He didn't tense, he didn't shout. He didn't even flinch as the first wave of attacks came at him. Instead, his eyes scanned, calculated, anticipating each motion before it even fully unfolded. Every block he executed was seamless, every dodge effortless, like he had already mentally rehearsed every possibility 100 times. The strikes that were meant to overwhelm him seemed to part around him, and yet his counters were subtle but deadly, not to harm, but to demonstrate precision. The monks, thinking sheer numbers would crush him, attacked again, faster, more aggressively. They shifted in formations, flanking him, aiming to trap him from multiple directions. But Bruce moved in ways that were both unexpected and natural, his body flowing like liquid through the space. A spinning kick from one monk met Bruce's calm sidestep, only to feel the precise placement of his foot deflecting the strike harmlessly. Another monk lunged, fists flying, and Bruce's palm intercepted the attack with a barely perceptible touch that sent the attacker off balance, landing softly but unmistakably on the ground. The courtyard grew tense. Birds fell silent in the trees. Dust kicked up from the stone floor as feet moved at speeds too fast for the naked eye to follow. Every monk attacking him felt a strange combination of fear, awe, and disbelief. Their strikes, once so confident and unyielding, now seemed clumsy in comparison to Bruce's effortless flow. And then came the moment when the full weight of his skill became undeniable. One by one, the monks attempted a coordinated assault, spinning, jumping, and striking as one. Bruce didn't block every blow with brute force. Instead, he used the energy of their own attacks against them, redirecting, deflecting, flowing with the momentum. A high kick became a pivot for him to sidestep, a punch became a guide for him to slip into perfect position. It was not just defense, it was an elegant dance of control, timing, and awareness. Their eyes widened as reality began to sink in. This was not a mere student or a curious visitor. This young man, this little dragon they had underestimated, had the kind of mastery that made centuries of experience seem like a warm-up. Even the most senior monks, those who had spent decades perfecting their forms, could not follow every move. They blinked, they hesitated, they misjudged, and Bruce never hesitated, never misjudged. For a moment, it was as if time itself had slowed. Bruce's movements became almost imperceptible, yet every response was perfectly timed, perfectly measured. The monks tried to increase the intensity, launching multiple simultaneous attacks, aiming to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. But Bruce Lee wasn't overwhelmed. He was one step ahead, reading angles, distances, and the intent behind every strike. Some attacks barely touched him, yet he used them as stepping stones, pivoting, turning, and spinning with such precision that it looked like choreography designed by the gods of martial arts themselves. Each monk landed a strike only to find it subtly deflected or countered in a way that humiliated their assumptions without ever harming them. The spectacle was mesmerizing, fluid, elegant, devastating in its beauty, yet entirely non-lethal. Sweat glistened on the monks' foreheads, their breathing grew heavier, but Bruce remained calm, serene, in full control. The courtyard, once filled with rhythmic chanting and confident movements, had transformed into a theater of awe. Even those watching from the edges, novices and students, could see it. This was mastery beyond technique, beyond training. It was intuition, discipline, and a mind fused with body in perfect harmony. By now, the leader of the monks, who had initially issued the challenge with a smirk, was forced to step back. His own attacks, executed with decades of skill, were met with effortless parries and slips. Each monk realized with a mix of pride and shock that they were witnessing a demonstration of martial arts at a level few could imagine. A silent, powerful lecture on control, speed, and precision. As the sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard, Bruce finally paused. He didn't celebrate, he didn't taunt, he simply stood, breathing evenly, eyes steady. The monks, still catching their breath, stared at him in disbelief. Silence hung over the courtyard like a living thing. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. It was clear to everyone present, this was no ordinary fighter. This was a man who had transformed skill into an art form, aggression into control, and chaos into harmony. The little dragon had proven that mastery wasn't about numbers, power, or noise. It was about precision, focus, and respect. The Shaolin monks, humbled yet enlightened, knew in that moment that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Bruce Lee hadn't just defended himself. He had shown them a new standard of excellence, one that would echo through the monastery for generations to come. And though no words were exchanged, the message was loud and unmistakable. True strength doesn't need to shout. It flows silently, powerfully, and inevitably. The courtyard fell into a silence so heavy it felt almost tangible. The sounds of morning, the rhythmic chants, the thumping of feet on stone, the swish of spinning strikes, all disappeared as if someone had turned off the world. Even the birds in the nearby trees stopped their songs, perching in stunned stillness. For the first time that morning, the monks who had been so confident in their abilities simply paused. Other monks, still in mid-motion, froze where they stood. A student in the corner had lifted his leg mid-kick and now held it suspended in the air, as if he had been caught in a dream. The leader of the monastery, normally calm and composed, lowered his hands slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief. Whispers began to ripple across the courtyard, soft at first, then spreading like wildfire. Who is this man?" one whispered, barely audible over the hush of awe. "I've never seen anyone move like that," said another, shaking his head. "It's impossible." Some tried to replay his moves in their minds, attempting to memorize the flow of his attacks, the rhythm of his strikes. But it was futile. Every motion Bruce Lee executed had been subtle yet precise, deceptively simple yet impossibly fast. His counters were perfectly timed, his footwork a harmony of balance and power, and his presence. It was magnetic, commanding attention without a single word. The monks, who had prided themselves on decades of discipline and skill, began to feel a strange mixture of humility and exhilaration. They realized that Bruce Lee's mastery wasn't about brute strength or overwhelming numbers. It was about control, timing, intuition, an almost supernatural understanding of movement, energy, and the human body. Even the novices, who had only begun their training weeks before, could feel it. The air itself seemed to hum with electricity, the residual energy of Bruce's silent demonstration. They whispered to each other, their eyes wide, struggling to put the sensation into words. "It's like he's everywhere at once, and yet nowhere," one said. Bruce's calm presence contrasted sharply with the chaos of the attacks they had just launched. Where they had expected aggression and shouting, there was serenity and focus. His body didn't tense, his eyes didn't panic, his movements didn't betray effort, yet every strike, every dodge, every step was calculated, measured, and devastating in its precision. A few monks began to replay the fight silently in their heads, trying to find a mistake, a flaw, a hesitation. But they found none. Bruce Lee hadn't rushed, hadn't overextended, hadn't faltered once. And in that realization, something remarkable happened. A collective respect began to form. Not for the man's strength alone, but for his discipline, his mastery, and the humility that allowed him to move with such calm amidst chaos. Even the leader, who had issued the original challenge, stepped back fully now. His mind raced, trying to reconcile what he had just witnessed with the centuries of training and tradition he had known. How could one man, without weapons, without backup, without loud declarations, render the combined attacks of dozens seemingly meaningless? How could skill and precision outweigh sheer experience and numbers? The whispers grew, spreading through the courtyard like a current. "He's not just strong, he's perfected every motion," said one monk, his voice tinged with awe. "I've never felt anything like this," said another. "It's as if he sees the future," murmured a third. Even those who had initially doubted him, the most confident, the most arrogant, now found themselves quietly bowing their heads in acknowledgement. Some could barely meet his gaze, sensing instinctively that this man carried not just power, but wisdom, respect, and clarity beyond their comprehension. And Bruce, still calm, still collected, remained at the center. He did not smile, did not boast, did not demand recognition. He simply breathed, eyes observing, absorbing, and radiating a silent confidence that filled the courtyard more powerfully than any shout or display could. Time seemed to slow in that moment. Every monk, student, and observer knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. A lesson in power, focus, and humility, delivered not through words, but through action. Bruce Lee had spoken a language everyone could understand, the language of mastery. As the silence stretched, the energy in the courtyard shifted. Respect, awe, and inspiration replaced doubt and arrogance. Whispers became nods, gasps became understanding, and what had begun as a challenge turned into a profound lesson. The monks realized something essential. Skill is not just about strength or tradition. It is about harmony, control, and the ability to move with intention while remaining calm under pressure. And in that moment, one thought echoed in every mind. This was a master at work. This was someone who had redefined what it meant to be unstoppable, silently, without a word, without fury, without force. The courtyard remained quiet, but it was alive with respect. Every movement, every glance, every breath now acknowledged Bruce Lee's presence as something more than a visitor. He was a teacher, a phenomenon, a living demonstration of perfection in motion. Even as he stood there, seemingly waiting for nothing, everyone knew the fight was over. The lesson had been delivered. And none of them would ever forget it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Bruce Lee came to a slow, deliberate stop in the center of the courtyard. The monks froze mid-step, mid-breath, their own movements still echoing the chaotic rhythm of the challenge moments before. He inhaled deeply, his chest rising, and exhaled with calm control, as if the very air itself had shifted to accommodate his presence. The silence was profound, almost sacred, as if the monastery itself were holding its breath. The lead monk, the one who had initially challenged him, stepped forward. His face, once confident and smirking, now reflected a mixture of humility, awe, and respect. With deliberate care, he lowered himself into a deep bow, hands pressed together in reverence. You have surpassed our expectations," he said, voice trembling slightly. "You are truly a master." A ripple of shock and disbelief passed through the courtyard. Other monks stopped mid-practice, some mouths open, some eyes wide, some heads bowed in quiet acknowledgement. Every student, novice, and observer felt the weight of Bruce Lee's skill, not just the speed, the power, or the precision, but the harmony and calmness that radiated from him like a tangible force. And here's where I want you to do something. Right now, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and comment below backhand index pointing down. Do you think mastery comes from skill, or does it come from respect? Is it the mind, the body, or the way you carry yourself that makes a true master? Let me know your thoughts. Oncoming fist. Bruce Lee didn't immediately respond. He simply smiled faintly, the corners of his lips lifting just enough to convey acknowledgement, but not arrogance. His eyes scanned the faces of the monks, and in that moment, the message became crystal clear. Actions speak louder than words. Respect is not demanded, it is earned. Mastery is not shouted, it is demonstrated. And true skill is not about defeating others, it is about controlling oneself while inspiring others to do the same. The lead monk looked around at his students, his voice firm but respectful. You have shown us what true mastery looks like. Not through anger, not through force, not through words, but through the perfect balance of mind, body, and spirit. His eyes returned to Bruce. We have trained for decades, yet what we have witnessed today is something that transcends tradition. A murmur ran through the crowd. Students exchanged glances, whispers of awe passing between them. It's unreal, said one, barely audible. He's faster than anyone I've ever seen. And he's calm. So calm. Another added, it's like he's moving through time itself. Everything else slows down around him. Bruce Lee's calm demeanor never wavered. He took a small step forward and bowed slightly again, this time toward the entire courtyard. The gesture was simple, unassuming, yet it carried the weight of profound respect. Respect not for himself, but for the tradition, the challenge, and the people who had faced him. The monks instinctively mirrored his bow, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson just delivered. The courtyard, once alive with the energy of motion and challenge, now hummed with reverence. The lesson was understood. Mastery is more than technique, it is presence. It is awareness. It is knowing when to act, when to wait, and how to move without unnecessary force. Even the students who had doubted him initially, who had whispered about his age, his size, or his youth, were now captivated. They replayed every strike, every movement, every subtle adjustment in their minds. They recognized that what they had just witnessed wasn't just skill, it was art. The kind of art that could only come from someone who had devoted their life to understanding not just how to fight, but how to exist in complete harmony with their body and surroundings. Finally, Bruce Lee straightened, walking slowly toward the edge of the courtyard. Every step was deliberate, controlled, and yet effortless. The monks instinctively moved aside, giving him space, their eyes never leaving him. Even the birds in the trees seemed to resume their songs, as if nature itself had recognized that something extraordinary had just occurred. Before he left, he turned slightly, enough for everyone to see his calm, confident expression. His eyes met those of the lead monk one last time, silently communicating a final lesson. Mastery is not about proving yourself to others. It is about knowing yourself, respecting others, and letting every action carry its own truth. The courtyard, now completely silent, finally exhaled. Monks, students, and onlookers alike felt the weight of what had just happened. They had witnessed not just a display of skill, but a demonstration of philosophy in motion, a reminder that true power is quiet, true respect is earned, and the lessons of a master go far beyond the strikes and blocks they see with their eyes. And as Bruce Lee disappeared from the center of the courtyard, his presence lingered like a shadow of inspiration, a lesson no one would ever forget, a memory that would shape every practice, every fight, and every understanding of what it truly means to be a martial artist. The courtyard remained silent for a long moment after the demonstration. The echoes of Bruce Lee's movements still seemed to linger in the air, vibrating through the stone floors, the pillars, and the very hearts of those who had witnessed it. The monks, who had entered the morning with confidence bordering on arrogance, now stood in awe, humbled by the sheer mastery they had just seen. Every breath they took felt different, as though they had been made aware of the limits of human potential and the boundless possibilities that came with discipline, focus, and respect. The lead monk, normally a figure of unwavering composure, finally spoke. His voice carried through the courtyard, calm but resonant. "What have we learned today?" His eyes swept over the students, the other monks, and finally rested on Bruce Lee, who stood quietly at the center, radiating calm control. Every word he spoke seemed heavy with meaning, demanding reflection rather than a simple answer. The students looked at one another, unsure how to respond. Some whispered quietly, their voices shaky with excitement and awe. Others simply bowed their heads, acknowledging the lesson without needing to articulate it. The leader took a deep breath, sensing the energy shift in the room, and waited for the answer that he already knew was unspoken. Bruce Lee lifted his hand slightly, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. Yet the message was loud and clear. Respect and control are stronger than aggression, precision outweighs chaos, and mastery without humility is meaningless. The students, who had been trained to perfect their strikes and their speed, suddenly understood the weight of the lesson. Skill alone could impress, but without humility, it could never inspire. Strength without respect is hollow. Discipline without understanding is empty. A hush fell over the courtyard as the monks processed what they had seen. Each movement, each block, each counter that Bruce had executed so flawlessly was now seen in a new light. It was not about overpowering opponents. It was about mastering oneself. It was about presence, control, and clarity. And as Bruce's calm energy filled the space, they realized the profound truth of what they had just experienced. The way of a true master is silent, subtle, and unyielding, not loud, forceful, or boastful. One young monk, still trembling slightly from the intensity of the demonstration, whispered to his neighbor, "I've trained for years, but I've never seen someone move like that. He didn't just defeat us, he taught us something we can carry for life." The sentiment spread quietly but powerfully among the students, and soon, nods of understanding rippled through the courtyard. The lead monk stepped closer to Bruce Lee, bowing deeply in acknowledgement. "Your skill is unparalleled," he said. "But more than that, your discipline, your humility, and your presence have taught us a lesson that words could never convey. You have reminded us that mastery is as much about the mind as it is about the body." Bruce Lee's eyes softened ever so slightly. He bowed in return, acknowledging the monk's words, not with pride, but with quiet gratitude. He turned his gaze to the students, who had been observing with wide, attentive eyes. Without a single word, he conveyed the message: practice with respect, fight with discipline, and move with awareness. These were the true foundations of mastery, far beyond the speed of a punch or the height of a kick. The monks began to mirror his bow, a gesture of both respect and understanding. Their minds, once focused on perfecting techniques and demonstrating superiority, were now filled with reflection and inspiration. Even the leader, who had challenged Bruce with confidence, now felt a deep sense of humility. He understood that mastery is not something to flaunt or dominate with. It is something to embody quietly, to honor through every action, every breath, and every step. As Bruce Lee began to walk toward the edge of the courtyard, the students instinctively made space for him. Each footstep was deliberate, calm, and unhurried, yet it resonated with power and authority. It was not the authority of fear or intimidation, but the authority of someone who has mastered himself. The energy he left behind was palpable, like a ripple through the water of their consciousness, spreading outward with every step he took. Even as he exited the courtyard, the lesson lingered. The monks and students stood still, their hearts and minds racing with reflection. What had started as a challenge to test skill had transformed into a profound lesson in life, discipline, and respect. They understood now that mastery was never about defeating others. It was about understanding oneself, controlling one's actions, and inspiring respect through integrity and presence. By the time Bruce Lee disappeared from view, the courtyard was filled with a quiet, reverent energy. The students bowed to the lead monk bowed to them, and in that chain of respect, the lesson Bruce had imparted became a living part of the monastery. No words could fully capture it, no story could fully convey it, yet each person present carried the memory and the teaching in their minds and hearts. Bruce Lee had walked away calmly, leaving behind more than just awe-inspiring movements. He left behind a lesson that transcended martial arts, a message that would echo through the monastery for generations. Skill without humility is empty, power without respect is meaningless, and true mastery is demonstrated silently, through action, presence, and control. The monks and students, now quiet, absorbed the weight of that lesson. And in that silence, they knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a fighter, but a teacher, a phenomenon, and a living embodiment of the art of mastery itself. True power is not loud. It is not about shouting over others, boasting about victories, or showing off in the presence of the unworthy. True power is subtle, quiet, and often invisible to those who seek only recognition. It is the mastery of oneself, the calm command over one's mind and body, and the ability to act with precision, clarity, and purpose. What Bruce Lee demonstrated that day was not just extraordinary martial skill, it was the essence of what it means to be truly strong. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to throw punches with reckless fury or display aggression for the sake of dominance. Every movement, every subtle shift in stance, every perfectly timed dodge spoke louder than words ever could. That silent mastery left the monks, students, and everyone watching in awe, not because he overpowered them, but because he had perfected himself. He had taken discipline, focus, and respect and woven them into action so fluid, so precise, that it became impossible to ignore. Strength without humility is empty. Speed without awareness is dangerous. Skill without respect is meaningless. Bruce Lee's calm demeanor, his unwavering focus, and his respect for his opponents were the true lessons of that courtyard. Every monk, from the youngest student to the oldest master, realized that day that mastery is not measured by the number of victories, but by the discipline with which one hones both mind and body, and by the respect one shows to every person, no matter their rank, size, or strength. And this is where the lesson goes beyond martial arts. It applies to every aspect of life. True mastery in life is being calm in the face of chaos, patient in the midst of pressure, and respectful even when you have the upper hand. It is about letting your actions, not your words, demonstrate who you are. Bruce Lee didn't need to shout. He didn't need to prove himself with threats or intimidation. His skill, presence, and quiet confidence proved it all. That is the kind of power that earns respect, inspires others, and leaves a lasting impact. So, here's what I want you to do. If you believe humility and skill are stronger than arrogance, if you believe that calm mastery can change the way people perceive you, type respect in the comments. Let's see how many of us understand that true strength is quiet, deliberate, and grounded in integrity. Oncoming fist. And don't forget, if you haven't already, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss stories like this, stories that inspire, teach, and remind us what it means to be disciplined, focused, and respectful in a world that often glorifies arrogance over skill. Globe showing Europe-Africa folded hands. Remember, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Your actions, your discipline, and your respect for others will speak for you. Whether it's in a fight, a challenge, or just your everyday life, the way you carry yourself, the way you treat others, and the calm mastery you embody will define your legacy far more than any loud words or momentary victories ever could. Bruce Lee walked away from that courtyard not with a sense of triumph over others, but with the quiet assurance that he had demonstrated something far greater, that true power lies in self-mastery, respect, and letting your actions do the talking. That is a lesson every martial artist, every student, and every human being can carry forward, not just in the dojo, not just in competition, but in every moment of life. So let this story serve as a reminder. Stay calm when others rush, stay humble when others boast, and let your skills and your integrity speak louder than the noise around you. True power is silent. True respect is earned. And true mastery is reflected in how you move through the world with grace, discipline, and awareness. Type respect in the comments if you feel the power of humility. And remember, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so we can continue sharing lessons like this with viewers all over the world. Globe showing Europe-Africa folded hands.